What's up, YouTube? I'm Max, I gather magic, and today we're going to be talking about my favorite commander in all of EDH, Jhoira, Weatherlight Captain. She's a legendary human artificer for 2 blue and red, and she reads, whenever you cast a historic spell, draw a card. Now, this is deceptively powerful for a number of reasons, but we're going to get into that. First, let's go over the deck. Now, we're going to start with our obvious ones, our artifact ramp, just the regular ramp. So Soul Ring, Arcane Signet, Izzet Signet, Felwar Stone, Mind Stone, Thought Vessel, which also says you have no max hand size, which is pretty dope. Commander Sphere, pretty good, and then later in the game, when you've ramped out and you don't need it anymore, you just sack it and draw a card. Palladium Mirror, which is a little bit slower, but because it's a creature, but it's still pretty good. It acts a little bit like a Soul Ring. Thran Dynamo, Hedron Archive, which again later on you can sack and draw 2 cards. And then not so sad robot anymore. I call this one Ultron Simulacrum, because look at him, he's so dope. So when he ETBs, he grabs you a basic land, and then when he dies, he'll draw you a card. So pretty good ramp there. Next, this is another form of ramp. We have our mana reducers. And they all reduce your costs by colorless because this is, at its core, an artifact deck. So, Saheeli the Gifted, her second +1, says that the next spell you cast this turn costs 1 less to cast for each artifact you control as you cast it. So, usually you have at least 3 or 4 artifacts on the board at any one time, and that's, on the low end. So, that can say anything from a free Soul Ring to a free Ugin. So super, super powerful. Ugin has a static ability that your colorless spells cost 2 less. Jhoira's Familiar says Historics, so not only is that a super flavor win, because it's Jhoira's Familiar, but it also reduces all Historics, so all your legendaries also. And I have a fair amount of legendary cards in this deck, so super, super good. Ethereum Sculptor, also an artifact, so if this comes down while Jhoira's on the board, not only will this reduce the cost of your subsequent artifacts, but it will draw you a card on the way down. Foundry Inspector, again, just your artifact spells cost 1 less, super good. So altogether, even without Saheeli the Gifted, that reduces your cost by 5. That's a lot. That's a free Blink Mothern. That's a free pretty much anything in this deck, just about. So super good. So our next one is I'm going to call it Slow Ramp. They're okay, but not as good. We'll get into that. So Corridor Monitor, when it comes in, it untaps a creature or an artifact. Usually you want to hit like Basalt Monolith, which doesn't untap by itself. Something like that. It is an artifact, so again, if Jhoira's on the board, it does draw you a card on the way down, so it's pretty okay. For 2, I don't mind including it in the deck. Are there better cards? Absolutely. Do I have access to them? Not yet. So, Basalt Monolith, what is there to say about it? I don't have a way to make infinite mana with it in this deck. There are ways to take advantage of that, but that's for another deck. Blink Mothern. So for 5, I call it slow ramp because not only does it cost 5, but also it takes a whole rotation of the table to come back to you and be of any use. But once it does get back to you, you're usually the player with the most artifacts, so it's really, really good if and when the turn gets back to you and this is still on board. Usually it helps other people by, maybe 2 or 3, so they won't want to kill it. So, slow but deceptively powerful. And then Unwinding Clock, again, kind of slow, unless you have something like Vidalcan Ori, which will untap not only your artifacts, but it'll let you play things at flash speed. So that combination, I'm sure you all know the Seedborn Muse and Leyline of Anticipation combo. Very, very similar. It's cool because it does untap things like Basalt Monolith. Basalt Monolith taps for 3. That's not nothing. So super powerful. Just a little bit slow because if you don't have flash, you're just kind of untapping your artifacts to maybe untap your artifact creatures and block, or untap your mana to leave up a threat. And our last kind of ramp category is I call this flexible ramp. So Spark Double can come in as a copy of a creature or a planeswalker and make it non-legendary. So you can copy Jhoira, you can copy any of your mana reducers, you can copy any of your planeswalkers that also kind of ramp you. So super, super powerful. And if you copy a planeswalker, it comes in with an additional loyalty counter. So that, could be the difference between it living and not. So super good. Chandra, that second +1 makes 2 red mana. Very good. Tezzeret, that +1. Again, untapping artifacts. Super, super powerful in this deck. He also acts as a tutor. So also super good. So that's our flexible ramp, I'm going to call it. So our next one is cantrips / card draw / I guess filtering, I'd call it. So Faithless Looting, for 1, you draw 2, ditch 2. And later in the game, if you're finding yourself in a spot where you don't have the cards you need or you need to dig a little bit further, you can flash it back from the graveyard and, keep digging. Unfortunately, you do ditch 2, but that's, a small price to pay for drawing 2 cards sometimes. Opt. A lot of my friends either sleep on this card or don't like it, and I don't understand why. It's 1 blue mana to scry 1, draw a card at instant speed. That's so powerful in so many different situations. I love it. Preordained, same deal. It's just at sorcery speed, but at the at the cost of sorcery speed, you get to scry an additional card. So pay 1, scry 2, draw a card. Super powerful. Riddlesmith. Whenever you cast an artifact, you may draw a card. If you do, discard a card. Pretty decent. Again, filtering through your deck, you have tons of artifacts in this deck. I didn't actually count. I imagine that it's somewhere in the 40 to 50 range, I think. But, again, if you're needing to dig through your deck a little bit more, this is kind of a mini Jhoira. Not as good, but pretty good. And then Ichor Wellspring. If Jhoira's on board, this says pay 2, draw 2 cards, and then if it gets popped, you draw another card. So just all around value, pay 2 to draw 2 is super, super good. So our next category is going to be our protection suite for us and for Jhoira. Number 1 is Spellskite. Super good. It's a 0/4, so at the very, very least, it's an okay blocker. But that's not what it's here for. It's here because it only costs 2, and you can change the target of a target spell or ability to Spellskite. So my particular play group plays a lot of Planeswalkers. I have a friend who has and attracts a Super Friends deck, so I've seen more than one ability that, just straight up pops a creature. And if Jhoira doesn't have Boots or Greaves or anything like that, she's super vulnerable to just an ability. She doesn't even need to be killed in combat. So this kind of mitigates that. And of course, like I said, Boots and Greaves, because every lovely lady needs some nice boots. Sigrift, because we're blue, and because it's protection, and it's just good. And then our 2 new ones from Ikoria, Fierce Guardianship and Deflecting Swat. So Deflecting Swat is pretty awesome because, number 1, it's free if you control Jhoira. Number 2, you get to choose new targets for a spell or ability. So if someone's got a card draw spell, that's your card draw spell. A ramp spell, that's my ramp spell. Anything like that. Deflecting Swat is super flexible, super powerful. I love it. Fierce Guardianship, what can I say about this? It's free, counters a non-creature, it's Force of Will, basically. Just straight up amazing. So my playgroup is really creature heavy, so I only have 2 counter spells, and one of them is Essence Scatter, which straight up counters target creature spell. I would have run actual counter spell if I had one. I don't, so this was the next best thing. And then Arcane Denial, just straight up good. Again, counter target spell. That spell's controller does get to draw 2 cards at the next upkeep, but, that's usually not that big a deal. You also get to draw a card, so, don't forget that. Yeah. So this is an artifact deck. I didn't feel the need for a lot of counters, but there are a few. So let's see. Our next category, I guess, is wincons / things that can become wincons. So we'll go to this first. So this combination, Mystic Forge, Aetherflux, and Sensei's Divining Top. So this, along with a mana reducer, is a quote-unquote infinite combo. It's not 100% because you can deck yourself, but we'll get there. So the way the combo works is this. So say you have your Jhoira's Familiar, your mana reducer, on the board, and you assemble this combo. Mystic Forge, Aetherflux Reservoir, and Sensei's Divining Top. So the way the combo works is this. You crack your top, draw a card. Draw a card, play the top. So you've now played one spell. According to Aetherflux Reservoir, you gain a life. So what do? You draw a card, put the top back on top, keep going. So Mystic Forge allows you to play artifacts or colorless non-land cards off the top of your deck. So you can repeat this process infinitely. Theoretically, infinitely. You'll usually have enough cards in your deck to do this. Aetherflux Reservoir, Storms. So you'll gain 1 life for the first time you do this, 2 life, then 3 life, and so on and so forth. It's not a particularly easy combo to assemble. It doesn't happen for me super often. And my playgroup doesn't love infinite combos, so I try not to do it that much, but if I happen to pull it out, it's super awesome, super fun. Can be made easier by things like Fabricate, which just lets you straight up go into your library, grab an artifact, and then put it in your hand. Tezzeret the Seeker, same thing. But, so yeah, there's my fun little... That's one of my win cons in this deck. And if you happen to almost deck yourself, or get anywhere near that, that's why we have Labman. Just as an insurance policy, our commander does say draw a card every time you do things. Pretty much anytime you do anything in this deck, you're drawing a card. So Labman as a just in case. To this combo in particular, say you're very low on cards and Aetherflux won't save you, or Aetherflux won't get you to a high enough life total before you run out of cards. That's what the Labman is for. He's pretty much an insurance policy in the form of an alternate win con. More win cons. Dramatic Reversal just untaps all your non-land permanents. Say you've used up all your rocks, but you have a handful of stuff. This says keep going. And it can let you do things like assemble this combo. It can let you do things like dig for your Labman. So super, super powerful. Another one is Saheeli's Artistry. Choose one or both. I don't think I've ever only chosen one. I'm confident that every time I've played this card, I've chosen both. You create a token that's a copy of target artifact. And then you can also create a token that's a copy of target creature, except it's also an artifact in addition to whatever else it was. So, theoretically, if I had a Blightsteel in this deck, that's why I would be including this card. But, so realistically, it kind of just copies an Aetherflux, or it copies a mana reducer, or it copies something like a Reckless Fireweaver and just makes more of it. Just, anything that might push the game more in my favor. It's a little expensive at 6 mana, but if we have Saheeli the Gifted, she can reduce that colorless cost, so I have played this for only 2 blue before, so it's super, super powerful. Super flexible, because it doesn't even have to target your own stuff, so keep that in mind. And then our last few cards are things that can become win cons. They're a little bit slower, but they do damage over time. So this is Saheeli Sublime Artificer. I know she's in Japanese. Basically what she says is when you cast non-creatures, you make a servo. That -2 says you can turn any one artifact that you control into another artifact that you control until the end of the turn. So she can be her own win con in that. She can turn one of the servos that she makes into another Aetherflux, into another Sensei's Top even, if you want to do, twice the shenanigans, another cost reducer, another Jhoira's Familiar, etc., etc. So she combos very well. She combos very well with Reckless Fireweaver, because whenever an artifact enters the battlefield under your control, you're dinging everybody for 1. It's each opponent. Now that text is super, super important. Perforos, God of the Forge, same thing. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, you're dinging everybody for 2. Again, it combos super well with Saheeli Sublime Artificer, because whenever you're casting non-creatures, you're making creatures. that will then ding your opponents for at least 2, sometimes 3 if you're lucky enough to have both of these on the board. And then Psychosis Crawler. Again, it's kind of expensive. It's 5 mana, but I love this card. It's been in my deck since the first version of this deck, I believe, and I don't think I've ever had any reason to take it out. Again, cost reducers, super powerful, fast ramp in this deck, so this card is not beyond the realm of possibility. So whenever you draw a card, which is what you want to be doing in this deck anyway, because that's what your commander says, you're dinging everybody for 1 life. So these are super important because they all say each opponent. So super, super good. And then the last thing we have is just some miscellaneous, good stuff. So Hull Breacher, super good. It kind of acts like a Notion Thief, but almost better because it makes you, your treasure tokens. Vidalcan Ori, I love this card so much. Again, when it combos with Unwinding Clock, super, super good. Elixir of Immortality, because sometimes when you're ditching cards, a lot of the cards that draw you cards in this deck also say discard cards, so get them back, gain some life. Expedition Map. Turn 1 map is pretty good, because then you can just grab your command tower, grab your whatever you need, and then you're good. Locust God. Whenever you draw a card, you're making 1/1 insects with flying and haste. That can be so powerful, especially in this deck when you can draw 3, 4, 5, 7, 8 cards in a turn. They might be 1/1s, but they add up very quickly, and drawing cards is what you want to do in this deck anyway. So super, super powerful, and also legendary. So when it comes down, Jhoira draws you a card. Karn's Temporal Sundering, same thing. This is legendary. So when you cast it, Jhoira draws you a card. And then you get an extra turn. And then you bounce something. So this card is super powerful in this deck. Especially if you have Saheeli the Gifted. Again, reduce that colorless cost. I have cast this for 2 blue. Super, super insane. Fact or Fiction. It's just straight up good. Brainstorm. Again, straight up good. Trophy Mage. Finds you your Commander Sphere. Or anything else that costs 3. Chaos Warp. So my friend actually found a very creative way to use this, and I'm kind of mad that I didn't think of it before. You target your own little tokens that you don't end up needing. So the tokens that you make with Saheeli Sublime Artificer, or anything else that, you might not be attacking with, you just do it, shuffle your deck, and this deck is pretty much all permanents, save for, a few. So you're probably going to hit something better than what you warped. And it's also a removal spell for your opponent's stuff. So Trash for Treasure. So you do sack. Again, you sack your little, tokens that you don't care about. You get a token from the graveyard, or you get an artifact from the graveyard to the battlefield, which I think is super powerful. It doesn't just go back to your hand. It goes back to the board, which I think is super, super awesome. So if someone Vandal Blasts you, or, whatever, if they pop an artifact, Rex Sage is super common in my playgroup. Get it back. Steel Sabotage. So this can be used a few different ways. You can return something to your opponent's hand. I would probably, in this deck, use this as a mini, tiny little Hurkyl's Recall, which I also don't have, but I planned for this deck. Grab something back to your hand, play it again, combo off, keep going. Or save one of your things that's about to be destroyed, put it back in your hand. Welding Jar. This is a 0 cost. I like these. They pretty much say pay 0, draw a card. And in addition, you can save one of your artifacts. It regenerates it. So again, Rex Sage, super common in my playgroup. This says no. Spellbook. Again, pay 0, draw a card. Also, you have no maximum hand size. Everflowing Chalice. I get scrutinized for never putting charge counters on this thing. I don't. It says pay 0, draw a card. That's pretty much it. Pyrite Spellbomb. Kind of a placeholder, but it only costs 1, and if there's a mana reducer, it again says pay 0, draw a card. I like it though, because you can pay red, pop something, or pay 1 and draw a card. I like things that you can sacrifice when you don't need them to draw a card. Mirror Retriever. It's a 1/1, so when you block with it, it's going to die. And then again, you grab an artifact from your graveyard. This puts it in your hand, but still really good. Witching Well. Turn 1 Witching Well is pretty powerful because you pay blue and then you scry 2 on your first turn. That can super set you up for just shenanigans. I've done it a lot of times. Red Elemental Blast. counters a blue spell or it destroys a blue card. Blue's super common in my playgroup. I see a lot of counter spells, so this counters counter spells, and I just think that's hilarious. I also had a Pyroblast. I think I took it out in lieu of something else, but anyway. Argivian Restoration. Again, returns an artifact from your graveyard to the battlefield. Super powerful. I don't know why this one is 2 blue and blue and the other one was only red and 2. But, yeah, super powerful. Blasphemous Act, because sometimes you just need to board wipe. And then Treasure Nabber, because my playgroup doesn't use a ton of rocks. But, you know, before everything happened with the pandemic, I did see a lot of people playing artifact decks or using a lot of artifact ramp. So this just says, hey, that's a nice rock you got there. I'll take that. I think that's even a soul ring the goblin's holding. Interessante. But anyway, yeah, that just about wraps up this deck. Let me know what you guys think. Any suggestions for this deck, definitely welcome down in the comments. So until then, have a great one. Stay safe out there, guys.